This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Catherine Shen. Chris Bohjalian's books aren't just bestsellers. One inspired a TV series, and a few became movies. His books have also been selected for the Barnes & Noble Book Club and Oprah Winfrey's Book Club. Chris does not shy away from research when taking on a new book. You may be familiar with his more than 24 novels that explore a myriad of topics, from midwives to the Armenian genocide. He has a new book out. It's called The Amateur, but he calls his latest work autobiographical, drawing from his own experience working on golf courses. In early August, I joined Chris at the Westport Library to talk about his latest work, his writing style, and his great love of libraries. I started the conversation by asking him to tell us about the inspiration behind his new book.
The world is filled with before and after moments. Rosalind Brown even wrote a wonderful novel decades ago called Before and After. And The Amateur is about one of those before and after moments. A golf ball, a broken thread in a golf net, a young golf prodigy drives a golf ball through the net in 1978, accidentally killing a classmate and caddy, and suddenly she has one of those before and after moments. There are two main characters, Mira Winston, an author looking back on that awful day. She's known best for books about alcoholic flight attendants and midwives on trial, and Kenny Foster, the classmate who long ago she accidentally killed.
So it's one of those premises when you read it, it seems really absurd. And I feel like absurd is the theme for the book. Would you say that is correct?
How absurd? I wrote this novel in an alchemic frenzy of 90 days, and I told no one what I was writing. I didn't tell my lovely bride, who's read every one of the 3.9 million words I've published. Before they were published, I did not tell our amazing daughter. I did not tell my brilliant editor, Jenny Jackson, known best for The Shampoo Effect, Pineapple Street. I didn't tell my agents on two coasts, because the idea of saying, I'm writing an autobiographic novel about a woman who's going to the LPGA but then accidentally kills a kid with a golf ball was going to be a non-starter for everyone who cares about me and wants me to succeed as a human being.
I wasn't going to ask this, but as you were telling the story, I'm actually really curious. So you risk offending multiple people in your lives, and I assume you love most of them. What were their reactions when you told them what your idea was?
Well, those people I just mentioned, I wasn't worried about offending. I was worried about them thinking that I had lost my mind. But you're on to something. A 2-time National Book Award winner once said to me when we were having dinner, "You're not doing your job if your family doesn't hate your guts." And The Amateur is so awash in autobiographic minutia. I am both the instrument of death and the dead kid, that it is a book I would never have written if my parents were still alive.
How's that for a preview for this book? So I do want to get into more of that, but I want to start off or continue this by asking, when did that alchemical frenzy start? When did the ideas come to your mind of writing this sort of part memoir, part mystery, and I think part social commentary?
A lot of social commentary. That's the part that really, really matters to me, especially as a dad of a daughter. It's June of 2024. I've just published a book called The Princess of Las Vegas. My 2025 book, The Jackal's Mistress, is all done. So no one is expecting anything from me. No one is desperate for a new manuscript. So I had absolute free rein to experiment and do what I wanted to do. And I thought, you know what? Let's use this summer to unleash the hounds of hell. All of the demons that have dogged me my entire life, let's do it. And I started the book in June, and much to my astonishment, 90 days later, I had a pretty solid first draft. And remember, none of the people who care about me, none of the people I love, was expecting anything. And on the last Monday in August of 2024, I tucked the manuscript into an email. I addressed it to my wife, our daughter, Jenny Jackson, my editor, my agents on 2 coasts, and I put in the subject line, "How I Spent My Summer Vacation," and at 9 a.m. I pressed send.
What was the subject line, all caps?
No, it wasn't on Truth Social. No, it was. You only put something in all caps if you're lying about your golf scores.
Because it just reminded me, this is a side note, but a college advisor of mine, he once told me that if I want to catch his attention, if I had a question, as a young journalist, and I wanted to reach out to him, his only rule for me was, please send him an email, and the subject line has to be all caps. Otherwise, he won't see it. And I was like, that's really good advice. So.
It is. I mean, the only time I try to use all caps is when I'm using the names of novels, my novels, other people's novels. Otherwise, I'm afraid if I'm putting all caps into anything, whether it's on the socials or an email, I'm shouting.
Well, I really want to reread this book because I feel like there's so many things that's underlining that we're learning right now that it's going to cause me to read the book very differently, and I think you all will too. And this next question is also just as absurd, and it gives you guys a preview to what you're going to read later on tonight, maybe, or next week, or whenever you want to start the book. Is you start off the novel by giving us a very detailed image of what a golf ball looks like, which I thought was hilarious because I think I can safely assume most of us probably knows what a golf ball looks like. But can anyone in this room tell me how many dimples are there in a golf ball? I don't have the answer. You have to read the book. But that's just how detailed the golf ball was. You give us the weight, you give us the materials. So I want to know, why was it important to present the physical details of a golf ball? Literally like the first page.
Okay, this is not going to be a spoiler, but the prologue, about 5 pages long, you assume is a third-person omniscient narrator. A third-person omniscient narrator who can tell you there are 336 dimples on a golf ball, who can explain to you how a golf ball flies through the air, how fast its velocity is, and then, as if it's a drone going over a country club in 1978, shares with you the details of the country club, the Doric columns at the front entrance, where the caddy pergola is, and then the golf ball killing Kenny Foster, the caddy. And then we get to what I hope is the first of many jaw-dropping moments when all of a sudden the narrator says, "I know because I was there. I was the girl who hit the golf ball."
So before we get to the girl who hit the golf ball, how much research do you usually do before you go into a project? Or do you research as you're writing, as the process is happening?
Usually when I begin a book, I have to do a couple of weeks of research to understand 2 things. Is the premise viable? And is it going to be fun for me to write? Because if it's not fun for me to write, it sure as heck is not going to be fun for you to read. So, for instance, when I was writing a book such as a mystery, The Sleepwalker, I spent about 2 weeks with sleep therapists and sleep doctors to understand sleep disorders and sleepwalking. And then I began to write, and I would stop when I hit writer's block. Because when I have writer's block, it doesn't necessarily mean I'm out of words or ideas. It means I've not done my homework, and I need to do some research. For the amateur, because it is so bloody autobiographic, I was a caddy. I am a novelist. The principal research I had to do was about legal precedents at golf clubs. What happens when someone gets hurt on a golf course? Has anyone been killed by a golf ball? If so, what were the civil and criminal issues? That was the kind of research that I had to do. And when I had a rough draft, then I spent a lot of time with a wonderful attorney who found me these small legal precedents and arguments going back to the 1960s about golf course accidents, and some of them are absolutely wild. And I've got to tell you, as absurd as this premise seemed to me in 2024 when I started writing it, I don't know if you noticed, but in the last year, there have been 2 TV series or movies about dead people on golf courses. In the new Will Ferrell TV series Hawk, I saw in the 2nd episode, his caddy dies. And then I gather, and I've not seen it, but I gather there's a new-ish Adam Sandler movie in which he drives a golf ball and kills his wife. It's a comedy.
Well, you just reminded me that Agatha Christie also wrote a novel that had a body discovered on the golf course. So got some nods, great. So I'm not making that up. I'm not gonna lie, when you said I was also before you said caddy, I thought you were gonna say you were also a golf ball. So I was gonna call for someone because I think we might have a problem tonight. Yeah. But I wanna get into the character, Mira. So she is so fascinating. And before we get into the details of this character, I do wanna read out something that she said, and this is early in the book, so no spoilers, but my eyebrows were doing things when I was reading this description. So she says, "I'm a very reliable narrator. I don't want anyone in book groups to suggest that I'm not. Arguing with this hardcover or paperback in hand or a glass of Merlot in another hand that I'm one of those unreliable narrators who's going to perform a little cause and effect sleight of hand in the last act or upend the narrative with obfuscation. Nope, you can trust me."
I am reliable AF.
Thank you. I actually really wanted to add that, but it's the AF part that's a little questionable. But can I, though? Can I trust her?
I believe you can. I don't think Mira Winston is obfuscating. She is telling it like it is. She is airing all of her guilt, her magical thinking, her self-loathing, and I also think she's got a really good sense of humor. I think Mira is very, very funny, especially when she's talking about, it's the small balls that kill, not the big balls. The world is filled. History is filled with, testicle-inflamed carnage.
I really hope that's the title of your next book.
Yeah.
Well, and we'll go into more details, but following that thought, because one of the many things that jumped out to me throughout the book is we stay in a very gray area with Mira. And at least I thought so. And the thing in many ways is, as we are learning slowly now, that Mira is really not your typical narrator because she doesn't ever try to justify what she did. And it's the people who are around her that constantly is telling her, oh, it's not a big deal, it's not your fault. And I mean, she had a character that basically said, you hit a golf ball, that's all you did. And she doesn't ever try to explain herself, and she doesn't ever try to stop the person the person's trying to make her feel better, but I think she'll just say like, well, I did the thing. You don't have to say that I didn't. And I think that tells us a little bit about Mira's character and the people who she's surrounded by. Why did you decide to highlight Mira in this way?
It's the era. It's 1978, which, much to my horror, is historical fiction. But I mean, and again, this is not a spoiler. In chapter 1, Mira is sobbing into her bed hours after accidentally killing a classmate, and all her father, the lawyer, wants to talk about is what an interesting intellectual exercise this is in civil liability, and her mother wants to make sure that she never has to know the fiscal value of a human life, and not once does anyone say, I wonder if a little talk therapy would help. No one who should be looking out for this 18-year-old girl is looking out for her. And no one has been looking out for her for the last 3 years. And I grew up in that era, so I understand well that the parenting model for the 1960s and the 1970s was benign neglect. And that is one of the reasons why Mira is who she is. There's one other moment that haunted me when I was writing it, and it's one of the scenes in the novel I think about a lot. In an early chapter in the book, Mira realizes that the older married man with whom she has been sleeping for years, their relationship is about to be outed. So she goes to a McDonald's with a good friend of hers, the only girl in her high school who knows about this affair, and she is so worried about what's going to happen to her older married paramour. And now Mira, who's telling the story as a memoir, says essentially, yep, in 1978, Lolita was worried about Humbert.
I'm really glad you helped me segue into that question, because a major theme for Mira is she is drawn to older men. There is learning, so you'll learn about why so during the novel. But what was really interesting to me is, so she's drawn to older men for many reasons, and we learn about them throughout the book. But early on, you realize that she's a golf prodigy. So she doesn't have a lot of peers on the golf course that share the same passion, let alone the same skill. And golf is also a very social game, but she's very isolated because she's a golf prodigy. And boys her age, she actually called duffers, which I thought was hilarious, because usually it's the other way around from her perspective. And so she avoids them, and they avoid her. So is it solely because she's lonely that she looks to her older paramours?
I think that's a great observation. Certainly that's true. But as she also at one point jokes, being a ferocious golfer to try to get my father's attention is arguably healthier than going the stripper pole route. She definitely feels diminished in comparison to her older brother in the eyes of her parents. Her parents look at her older brother with incredible reverence because he's a great guy. He's a legitimately wonderful older brother. But hours after she's killed this kid, her father's saying, I better call your older brother. I want to make sure that he doesn't get too upset when he hears about it and screws up his internship in Washington, D.C.
We're listening to my conversation with New York Times bestselling author Chris Bohjalian at the Westport Library. His latest book is The Amateur. This is Where We Live. I'm Catherine Shen. We'll be right back. This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Catherine Shen. Today, we're listening to my conversation with Chris Bohjalian at the Westport Library. He's the author of over 24 books, including his latest, The Amateur. Reviewers describe it as a masterpiece and a book you just can't put down. It follows 18-year-old Mira, a slightly impulsive teenager and golf prodigy. The story follows her life after accidentally killing a classmate at the golf course. Let's dive back into the conversation. Mira is so fascinating to me, too, because we were introduced to her when she was young, when she was 18. But then we learn about her paramour adventures, if you will, that has gone on for a couple of years. And she is, the thing that strikes me, because I don't think I often see this in a female character of that age, is she is very self-aware. It's like she's very smart. And not that that means much in terms of making certain emotional decisions, but I just want to stress that she's so aware of what she's doing, but she's also very self-sabotaging. And we have the awareness as a reader, I think, that she was being exploited. But of course, she doesn't know that. And she definitely could have used a good therapist. But this was also 1978, which is an important point to note, right?
Yeah. And in 1978, she's also a ferocious competitor. She's an athlete. And if she were a boy instead of a girl, all of her acting out would be viewed so differently. All of her ferocity on the golf course would be viewed differently. So many of the things Mira did are things I did, and I was the life of the party. No one was judging me, but if I'd done them as a young woman, I would have been judged.
Well, and I really was rooting for her. There was a point where I was like, I want Mira to succeed, but not in this very self-sabotaging, I need you to be healthier. But why female protagonists? Because it's so believable, and I'm not saying you can't write a female protagonist, but is there a reason why you went with someone like Mira, her character, her age, her background? What was the thought process of building this character?
First of all, your gender is way more interesting than my gender. Secondly, the journeys on which I send my characters demand a sort of emotional recognition that so many men, especially men of my generation, don't have. And I think about this a lot, not just in the context of The Amateur, but in a 2012 novel I wrote called The Sandcastle Girls. It's about the Armenian genocide, and the narrator is a woman named Laura Petrosian, a novelist, and she sees a photograph at the Armenian Museum of America in Watertown, Massachusetts, and realizes, based on the caption, this woman dying in Aleppo, Syria in 1915 might be related to her. If a man saw that photograph, his likely reaction would be, isn't that interesting? But Laura risks her emotional equilibrium and everything she knows about her grandparents to do this deep genealogical dive into her family history to unearth all of these secrets about her grandparents. And I don't think a man would have done that. My gender is so uptight compared to yours. So, for instance, Mira says at one point, the only reason why golf was invented was so that men would talk to each other.
And make eye contact. Well, and I keep saying Mira is self-aware. Chris, you're self-aware. So, and you mentioned that you are both Mira and Kenny, I think, in some ways. So I'm curious to hear, what was it like? What's the process like? Or do you remember the moment where you realized that, man, I need to dig deeper into my emotions?
First of all, it's possible to be unbelievably self-aware at 18 and still make spectacularly bad choices. The frontal lobe isn't fully developed and won't be fully developed for another at least 5 or 6 years, which is why teenagers do so many stupid things, including me. I mean, there's a moment in the novel when Mira is furious at someone and sets that person's door on fire. And so many readers, early readers of the book, have said to me, what an awful thing to do. And my immediate reaction was, yeah, I guess, but I did it all the time. I was an expert at setting people's doors on fire.
I'm glad that made it into the book. Because I was going to ask, how much of yourself is in these pages? So at least that was.
Oh, no, there's so much of myself in these pages. I was never 18 years old on cocaine or weed at a criminal deposition. But I did a lot of other stuff, Mira did, I promise.
Well, I'm glad we had that clarification. Did you have fun writing those scenes? I mean, since you mentioned Mira setting a door on fire because of a person, and honestly, the person deserves it. But do you have fun sort of going back to those moments when you did it and you put that energy into Mira? Because I feel like as a reader, you can feel that sort of a little sadistic joy, if you will.
I have never had as much fun writing a book as I had writing this. I had a blast. This was the most professionally fun 3 months of my life. And I love what I do. I've loved writing all of my books. No, that's not true. I didn't love writing the bad ones because I knew they were bad when I was writing them. But I certainly have loved writing my good books, but never have I had as much fun writing this, even though I was airing out my magical thinking demons, my self-loathing demons, my guilt demons, the weirdness of being a golf caddy and the class divide, and my own self-esteem issues when I was a teenager. I was having a blast.
Well, we'll go back to your various demons in a second, but because you mentioned caddying, so I want to go back to that for a moment. What was it about the caddying experience, or what did you see on the golf course that stayed with you to the point where you wrote this book?
First of all, I need to acknowledge that I had terrific parents. They were as flawed as any parents of that generation. But from the time I was 8 years old, I was watering down the Jack Daniels, the Cutty Sark. By the time I was 10, I was always volunteering to make mom and dad their cocktails because I knew I could water them down and minimize the Edward Albee, Virginia Woolf moments. I went to 5 schools in 3 states in 6 years. So I was always moving around a lot. And just after 10th grade, my family moved from Miami, Florida, to a suburb of New York City. And I started caddying. And I fundamentally did love caddying. It was a great job. I'm buffed, I'm tan, I'm cash rich, and between my morning and afternoon loops, I'm reading great books under the caddy pergola. But my family could never have afforded to belong to that country club. So when my classmates were there, they were at the tennis courts or the swimming pool, they were not going to be caddies. I was the only caddy from my high school at that country club. And I began to understand in my second summer, in ways that I could not have articulated by God, the class divide in America. I'd hear the conversations of the mostly men on the golf course, and I understood at first their bewilderment that one of their kids' acquaintances or friends had to caddy, and then their pity.
Do you remember the moment you realized that was the case? Sort of having that awareness that you are standing sort of in between that divide.
I don't remember the exact moment, no. But I do remember one particular really delightful father of one of my classmates giving me an outrageously big tip and saying something along the lines of, buy yourself something fun, not just books for college.
Well, look at where you are now. Let's do a little round of applause real quick, right? Good job, Chris. Well, and it sounds like you put a lot of yourself into your novels. This is your 26th novel, right? That's pretty amazing. And that's a lot of life experiences into these novels. And I'm curious to hear if your writing process and your research process changes per novel. Because I'm thinking you probably bring a little bit of yourself into each, right? Is it different each time? Is it a different experience? Are you more into it in some than not?
That's a great question. Historical fiction demands a lot of research. When I was writing Hour of the Witch about the first divorce in North America for domestic violence, I learned a lot about Puritan theology. When I was writing The Light in the Ruins about one Italian family's complicity with the Nazis in Tuscany, I learned a lot about, when we think of Tuscany, it's Disneyland for adults. Wine, cheese, rolling hills, pasta. But in 1944, it was a hellscape. When I'm writing a contemporary literary fiction quasi-novel of suspense like The Amateur, no, I did not have to stop very often to do research.
When the idea gets rooted in your brain and you're starting the process of writing it, do you already know the ending or are you writing towards it?
I've only written one book where I knew the ending. And if you look at the years in which my books were published, it is the longest duration between books. It took me 3 years to write the double bind because I knew the ending. I knew A and I knew Z, but I did not know the 24 letters in between, and it was the hardest book for me ever to write. When I do not know the ending, such as a book like The Amateur, A, it's way more fun, and B, it goes much more quickly because I'm not trying to solve a puzzle. I'm just having fun letting my characters take me by the hand and lead me through the dark of the story.
We'll continue our conversation with author Chris Bohjalian. Learn more about this event, the Westport Library, and the novel by visiting our website dedicated to readers and book lovers, ctpublic.org/whereweread. That's also where you can subscribe to our monthly Where We Read newsletter. This is Where We Live. I'm Catherine Shen. Stay with us. This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Catherine Shen. In his new book, The Amateur, author Chris Bohjalian drew much of his inspiration from his own experience as a teenager and golf caddy. We spoke recently at an author talk hosted by the Westport Library. We're going to continue to listen back to that conversation, and we'll also hear some questions from the audience. Let's get back to the conversation. Don't want to out potential friends or frenemies or enemies, but because you put yourself a lot into these books, and you have some characters in The Amateur that, not gonna lie, I really want to punch in the face a couple of times. Sort of channel my inner Mira as I was reading this. Do you also channel yourself in those various characters, or do you take inspiration from people around you?
It's always fascinating to me, and I'm not the first novelist to observe this. How many people are sure they were the basis for a character, and they never crossed your mind you were thinking of them? And how many people you fear are going to see themselves in a character because they are the inspiration, and they never notice it? In a book like The Amateur, my parents would definitely have recognized themselves in both Kenny Foster's parents and in Mira Winston's parents, but in different ways. And certainly, my parents' friends who are still alive will recognize references to certain parties and drinking orgies and bacchanalian keg parties for teens. And certainly my friends at college, my college and my wife's college, will recognize a lot of the scenes in Northampton, Massachusetts. And you have people around you and yourself that you use sort of as a baseline for characters. What about for stories? Because it feels like, because you've written so many, you've crossed genres. You've written about human trafficking, historical fiction, romance, alcoholism involving airplanes, and you have a wide range here. Golf pun, please note that. Mic drop. So, whether it's a visit to the doctor's office or talking to a friend or you're reading a book, I think you've drawn inspiration for your novels from these various places. What's the moment like when you realize that that's a novel? It's blissful, but it's also not necessarily the beginning of the beginning. I have had so many brilliant ideas for novels that in fact were absolute dumpster fires. And I either need my lovely bride Victoria, my brilliant editor Jenny Jackson, to walk me in off the ledge and say, yeah, don't go there. That's just not a good idea. But they were too late for The Amateur, though. Pardon me? They were too late for The Amateur because you didn't give them a chance. Yeah, and I did not want to because I've been doing this since the Mesozoic era, and there was something about what I was doing with The Amateur that I knew sounded certifiable in the elevator pitch, but I knew was right. I knew in all my heart that this was going to be one of those 2 or 3 pivotal books in my career, one of those books that will feed my soul when I'm writing it, and will make a difference in readers' lives, books like Midwives or The Sandcastle Girls. Because this is your 26th novel, and you've written for so long, and I think you've shared that you've always known you want to be a writer. It's kind of a big question here, but what do you think is the biggest thing you've learned about yourself as a writer? Any surprises? Writing this book or generally? Just generally, and this book, if whatever you want to share. Okay. One of the things my wife has observed about me, and she's so smart, and I think this is right, and it speaks wonderful, it says something really nice about me, so I probably shouldn't share it, but I love so many books by writers who I don't necessarily like as people, but it doesn't bother me because I still love their work. And likewise, I am friends, really close friends, with so many writers whose books I don't love. And what my wife was getting at, and she was right, is that you really do care about the work. That's what matters to you, the work.
And do you feel that each book changes you as a person or as a novelist? For example, has The Amateur changed Chris?
Some books change me. The Sandcastle Girls was life-changing because it allowed me to channel all of my rage at the fact the Armenian genocide was neither acknowledged nor known when I was writing it. A book like The Amateur changes me because it's cathartic for me, finally getting all of these demons out there. But I have written so many terrible books that didn't change me at all and shouldn't change anyone.
Well, another thing about The Amateur that I did not expect is, so actually, I grew up with a lot of golfers in my family. And I think they were a little disappointed that I never took on to the game. And my uncle actually hit a hole-in-one, once, and I thought, could he have had a golf ball drive into someone's head? Because it's possible. So I'm glad that I never gave myself that chance. But I found myself becoming really interested in how the game works because I never really took the time to really understand the game or to learn more about it. Do you find yourself getting into that? Because I'm curious, like, as a reader, because I'm reading a piece of work that's already, the information is already presented to me. So it's nice and easy for me to consume and learn, and if I'm interested in something else, I can always Google it. Do you get into that research? Like, do you love researching? Do you go deep into it? I've also spoken to authors where research is their way to avoid to do the actual work. So what are your thoughts about that?
I do love the research, but it's really important not to let the research overwhelm the story. I'm going to say that 90% of the things that I learn never appear in the book. But I need to know it because it's important for character development. There's nothing that drives most readers in this room crazy than when you get to page 300 in a 330-page novel and there's a massive information dump. If you're writing about the Titanic, you don't need to know everything about coal.
Really?
Truly.
Well, and I'm curious to learn more about you as a reader. We're learning so much about you as a writer, but what are you like as a reader? How do you read? Are you also cross-genre? Do you stick to a certain genre that you typically reach out to, or are you sort of across the board?
I read everything. No, I don't stick to any one genre, but how I read has changed a lot. No positive thanks to the smartphone. Prior to the smartphone, I could read anywhere for 3 hours at a time, with just me and the book and the island, and I'd be in heaven. But my attention span has been completely brutalized by this smartphone. So now the way I read in bed beside my wife and our dog is that I'll read 10 pages, then I will go to my phone to check the score of the Mets game. I will read 10 pages, and I will go to Instagram to try to get an endorphins hit. I will read 10 pages and then play Words with Friends with my friend Adam Turtletop in Los Angeles. Now, the only way I can read for 2 or 3 hours at a time is if I leave my smartphone in my library, go to the other end of the house with my book, and take a bath.
How many of you feel better in this room after hearing that? Because I do too. Whew, all right. Because I'm in between like 7 books right now. Each book has a bookmark in it, and it's wild. So thank you for sharing. That just made all of us feel better. Well, so your attention span changed as a reader. Did it change as a writer?
Yeah, completely.
Oh no, he's getting comfortable.
Completely. The only way I can remain focused on my writing is if I put my computer, if I turn off the Wi-Fi on my computer, and I put my phone in airplane mode, and I hunker down. Otherwise, it is too easy to say, well, I want to find out more about how many women golfers have hit holes in one. Something I don't need to know, but it might be really interesting.
But you need to know.
Yeah. So.
We also need to know. So thank you for your work.
Yeah.
I think I have time for a question or two, so we're going to open it up to audience Q&A in a second. So if you have some questions, please feel free to jump on the mic in a little bit. But I feel like a lot of people, at least myself, I love learning about people's writing routines. You know, do you have any personal care routines or writing routines that you typically follow in order to complete your project? Especially when you're writing a topic that's very heavy, and I think sometimes the trauma stays with you.
For almost my entire adult life, up until March of 2020, I would be at my desk at 5 or 6 in the morning with my sugar-free Red Bull. I wrote my first 3 books between 5 and 7 a.m. in the morning before going to work at ad agencies. When I left advertising to write full-time, I still had to be at my desk at 6 a.m. All of that changed in March of 2020, but not simply because of the pandemic. I was scheduled to go on a book tour beginning Saturday, March 14th. My wife and I had gotten a dog on February 22nd, and my big concern was this. We just got a dog. It's a beautiful, sweet rescue, and you are about to desert her for a 3-week book tour and show her that humans suck. Well, the world had other plans. There was no book tour, and wait for it, I got COVID. And when I got COVID, I lost my voice. And I would be mute for most of 2020. And we're in a pandemic. And I've got this beautiful dog. And I realized, you know what? You don't have to be anywhere. There's no point in getting to your desk at 6 a.m. And so my routine changed. Now, my dog wakes me up somewhere between 6 and 7 in the morning. And when she wakes me up, which is just a beautiful moment, because there's nothing better than when your dog is wagging her big tail and licking your face and saying, "It's morning." It's just beautiful. I will get up, we'll feed the cats, and my dog Jessie and I will go into the woods, or we will go to the Middlebury College campus where she can run around and not run into trees because now she's blind, and we'll just have a great time together. And if I'm at my desk by 8 a.m., it's fine. The work gets done. I'm starting 2 hours later, but I'm as productive as ever. I mean, you and I talked about this a little bit earlier, but we are in the midst of this great post-pandemic literary renaissance. And whether you're Barbara Kingsolver, whether you are Curtis Sittenfeld, whether you're Ann Patchett, we are in the midst of a wonderful, wonderful literary moment where writers are so damn productive. It's great.
Well, us readers thank those damn writers for being so productive, because without you, we would have no books to read. So I think we are starting our audience Q&A.
2 things. Do I have anything to worry about, Chris, in this book? Gervais.
My friend Gervais Tiernan from Bronxville High School. Hi, Gervais.
Hi, Chris.
You have nothing to worry about, but you will certainly recognize a certain country club near where we went to high school.
I haven't read all 26, but Chris and I are working on the whole collection, and I did get the first book, but it didn't get here in time for today.
Gervais is referring to her wonderful brother, Chris, and my first novel, A Killing in the Real World, the single worst first novel ever published, bar none. And Gervais, I think this must be at least the 5th event in many different states. You've appeared and joined me. Thank you.
Oh, Chris, it's always a pleasure. Last thing, because I won't see you next week, happy birthday.
Thank you.
So I haven't read the book, but I'm curious. when you talk about Mira, the before moment and the after moment, if the moment never happened, what would Mira have done? Would she have become a professional golfer? Or have you thought about, like, who was Mira, just given that there was an autobiographical aspect to this book?
If Mira had not accidentally killed Kenny Foster, she hopes she would have become an LPGA golf great. But at one point in the book, she does ruminate, I don't know, maybe I wasn't as special as I believed I was. Maybe I wasn't quite good enough. Maybe I was always going to be just a very good amateur.
Whatever made you thought you could be a writer?
Whatever made me think I could be a writer, well, certainly there are a lot of people who still question my decision to go in that direction. And I certainly had a lot of people telling me not to do it, including a creative writing professor, writer in residence at my venerated alma mater, who, when I showed her my short story to try to get access to her seminar on the short story, who read my work and said, I have 3 words of advice for you, and I waited, and she said, be a banker. And then, of course, I amassed 250 rejection slips before I sold 1 single word. So it wasn't so much that I knew I was going to be a writer, just that I knew that writing gave me so much pleasure.
I want to just add, remember that line. It's going to pop up, and it's a pretty amazing scene.
The be a banker line.
Yeah. Sorry, to be a banker line.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I mean about how autobiographic this novel is.
I don't have a question for you. I have a little anecdote. I have a friend who went to Amherst with you, and she told me that in college you gave her a sample of your writing so she could give you her opinion of it. And after reading it, she said, Chris, you really ought to stick to stuff you know.
I should stick to what?
You really ought to stick to stuff you know. So
yeah.
I think she set you on the right path.
Well, please give her my best.
She might show up in the next novel. Before the evening ended, Chris shared his thoughts about the power of libraries.
I just want to, first of all, thank you, Catherine. I loved chatting with you. These questions were just wonderful. I want to thank Jennifer and everyone with the library. Libraries are magical places, and librarians are magical people. No one becomes a librarian because they want to be the final wall protecting the First Amendment, but suddenly they are. So I want to thank librarians for being so courageous. I want to thank the booksellers at Barnes & Noble because off-site events are hard. And they are here, and so I want to thank them. And most of all, I want to thank all of you for celebrating books with Catherine and Jennifer and the library and Barnes & Noble and me. Thank you all.
That was Chris Bohjalian, author of more than 20 books, including his latest, The Amateur. I spoke with him at an event at the Westport Library. And by the way, we have a website dedicated to readers and book lovers, ctpublic.org/whereweread. That's where you can subscribe to our monthly Where We Read newsletter. I'm Catherine Shen. Today's show is produced by Tess Terrible. Thank you to Versal Studios at the Westport Library, who hosted and recorded this event. Our technical producer is Dylan Reyes. Download Where We Live anytime on your favorite podcast app, and thank you all so much for listening.